Okay, so last time we were talking about genetics that causes cancer. So again, that you can inherit multiple changes to the DNA, which can result in abnormal cells, which could be potentially cancerous. We also talked about inherited genes, that if your family line has a history of getting a certain type of cancer, you might be having a higher risk of getting that cancer as well. So you could have that DNA tested to find out if you do actually have those genetic markers and whatnot. But again, it does not mean you will get cancer. It just means you may have a higher risk of getting it. Okay, so check it out. We talked about cancer and evolution, how yes, cancer is a bad thing, should have weeded its way out of the population. However, it's still in our population today, which means there must be some underlying reason or cause for this. Turns out many people will develop cancer later on in their life, as we talked about, and most people do not know they have cancer until like 40 plus. So most people are having their children between the ages of 20, 35, somewhere in there, and as such, they're already passing on those cancerous genes to their offspring. So it's probably not going to get out of our population anytime soon. Back in the day, not a lot of people died of cancer because they just died well before they got cancer. So disease, sickness, things like that. And as we talked about, the dark ages was not a good time for people, so living to 30 was a good thing. Hey, you made it, long time. But again, programmed death for new generations, perhaps. We talked about apoptosis, which is the programmed death of a cell. So apoptosis actually occurs when you're developing as an embryo. So over time, in the womb, your fingers were once webbed, and then the cells deleted, creating your fingers as you see today, and also your toes. So some of you do not have the webbed fingers and toes, but some people do. It does happen, okay? We also talked about how you have a tail in the womb, and that once again gets deleted over time, but people can be born with tails, which is kind of crazy. We also talked about the gill slits, which are actually right there. They're not actually gills, they're just openings towards where gills would be. Now, you never develop gill slits, nor do you develop gills. All right, so those genes have been lost and changed over time. But some of these have remained over time, perhaps because it was a good foundation to building a good offspring, which would mean a good success rate that they are living. Okay, bad genes, of course, would have worked their way out because those offspring would have never actually been born. But apoptosis is responsible for a lot of your development, deleting cells out that are not needed. So now, there's very specific cells. This is where we left off, talking about stem cells. And this is where it gets very interesting. What exactly are stem cells? So after an egg is fertilized, so the female carries the egg, it's fertilized by the sperm cell, it multiplies through mitosis. So it's going to make a bunch of copies of itself. Are they heart cells? No. Are they brain cells? No. Are they liver cells? No. What cells are they? They're just blank slates called stem cells. Stem cells are any and all cells. They have the ability to transform and become whatever you need them to be as you develop through the embryo. Okay, so it becomes a ball of cells that do not have a definite shape or function yet. As you get older, okay, as you mature within the womb, they then become brain cells, heart cells. But you have to have a foundation to work with. These cells can literally become anything, all right, if programmed correctly. So that's what's caused a lot of interest in these. In the adult version of you, existing cells in adulthood that have the ability to change into different types of tissue as well. In your bone marrow, so inside your bones, you do have cells, and these are some unique stem cells, but they're called adult stem cells. And they can become all sorts of things, white blood cells, red blood cells. They can make other types of cells within your body too, which is pretty cool. So we've been looking at a lot of those. All right, have you ever heard of a bone marrow transplant? No? So sometimes individuals, what they do is they'll take the bone marrow from one individual and transfer it into another, okay, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, what they're trying to do is trying to get those stem cells to create new, say, white blood cells or parts of the immune system to beat off a deadly disease or virus within somebody else's body. Could be. So for example, they actually cured a couple people of HIV. There is actually no technical cure for it, but they actually did. How did they do this? They took the bone marrow from an individual that was, in fact, immune to HIV. They took that from them and injected it into 2 patients, or it's actually like 8 of them, into these patients that actually had the virus. 2 of which, of the 8, actually survived and were HIV cleared. So what that means is the other person's immune system that was immune to it, that kicked in and started producing white blood cells and stuff like that could actually beat the virus. Now, what happened to the other 6 people? It was not effective on them for whatever reason. Most of the candidates they chose, it was a last-ditch thing, that they were not doing well, that their health was declining because the virus had taken over quite a bit. But now, we have options. Now, stem cells, again, you come from the egg and sperm cell, which makes the blastocyst, which can create all sorts of new cells, circulatory system, nervous system cells, immune system cells, whatever they are. Bone marrow, usually the way they have to get this, okay, to get your bone marrow cells, they have to lay you on your side, and the biggest bone that's got the biggest mass to it is your hip bone. So they take this big old needle and then they go boom, jam it right into your hip bone. They have to puncture through your bone with this needle to get the bone marrow. I'm sure that feels great, by the way. So then they take that and then they can culture these cells and they can program them to whatever they need to be. Maybe muscle cells, neurological cells, blood cells, so forth down the line. A lot of times it's the immune system that they're looking at because people are dying and they're trying to do that. Now, this is where it gets interesting. These cells, like I said, they're already slightly programmed. They're still stem cells, but they're adult stem cells. So it's kind of limited on what they can do and how they can make these things. So it's a bit more touchy. These cells right here are highly programmable. There's like no programming whatsoever to them. And they can become any type of cell. So you're thinking, okay, what's the big deal with this? Why is that so important? Think about this. If you were in a car accident and you were paralyzed from the waist down, you severed your spinal cord, the chances of you walking again one day are slim to none. Probably just won't happen. The neurological cells, they have to take time to regrow, and they have to, it's like fiber optics, they have to connect back together correctly, otherwise it just doesn't work, okay? But what if you could put stem cells in there to bridge the gap to get them to connect more effectively and easily, and then allow you to walk? That would be interesting, right? That would save a lot of people's lives, maybe. What if you got your finger cut off? What if we could grow new muscles, new skin tissue for you so that your finger comes back? That we could even eventually get you to grow those bones back that you're missing too. How cool would that be? That'd be pretty amazing. These cells potentially could have the ability to do so. What? Yeah. So what's the problem? Why aren't we doing this? Anybody know? Where do these cells come from? What are these cells? If you take these cells and program them, what does this turn into? A baby. So, back in the day, to give you a little history, there's still abortion clinics out there. So scientists said, well, that's awful that these abortions may be happening, but what if we could use these stem cells to do research on, to actually help people? We're going to take a bad situation maybe and turn it into a good situation. Are you okay with that? Some of you may be against abortion, that's fine. But what if someone did get an abortion and they could take these cells and turn it into something different? Like maybe allow somebody to walk again one day. Now you're opening the door to abortions if you don't agree with them, right? So here's the dark side of this. Think about it. If they allowed this to happen, what would stop people from getting abortions at abortion clinics and getting paid high dollar for these? What? Literally, people could be getting pregnant just to have an abortion to sell their stem cells.
That sounds really stupid.
Sounds really immoral, right? Maybe. It's up to you. But to me, it sounds very immoral that you're just doing that for that. If it was another circumstance or whatever, it was puts the mother's life in jeopardy or something, okay, I get that. Okay? But that's just me. But just to make money off of it, that's not that cool. That's just my opinion, though.
Still an abortion.
True. So, either way, though. So, scientists were wanting these stem cells to further the research. However, many government officials saw the darker side of this too, and as such, they put restrictions on using embryonic stem cells, which forced scientists to look in other routes. So, what do? They end up looking into normal cells, like your skin cells, and reverse programming them into stem cells, and they actually figured out how to do that. They also figured out how to take an unfertilized egg cell, say this cell here, take the mother's DNA that she put in there, 23, kick it out, and then take your DNA, all 46, this blank slate, and plug in your DNA, go through a process in the lab to culture and make new stem cells with your exact DNA. Now, you're thinking, okay, how's that any different? What they did is they took an unfertilized egg cell, okay, which means the sperm cell did not fertilize it, which means it will never have a chance of becoming a baby, essentially, okay, or an embryo. And they just took the egg cell and they took out the DNA and plugged in someone else's DNA, which then through a process in the lab, they can culture and make it go through mitosis and create stem cells that have your exact DNA, which is even better, right? Okay, so what do you think about the morality of that situation? Thoughts, ideas? Nothing? So, females do produce like, they have like 500,000 eggs, okay, as a female, you do, in your body. Do you decide, are you ever gonna have like 500,000 kids? No. Okay, so if you did, that would be like, holy smokes, that'd be terrible, okay? So typically most of these egg cells go unfertilized all the time, because if they did get fertilized every single time, then well, you'd have a bunch of kids. Not about you, but one's enough for me almost too. Like they're a handful. So having 65 would be insane, right? Yeah. Who wants 65 kids? Nobody. Okay.
How would that even?
Think about how many lunches you would have to pack.
That's
Would that
awesome.
even be possible?
I don't even know. Like there's a show that's called 19 and Counting, which I think they're up past 19 now. But so one family has had 19 kids.
Why would you do
That to me is like,
My
that's
grandma
20
did-
years
why
at
would you
least.
even have 5?
I don't know.
My neighbors have like 8 kids.
Yeah.
My grandma just gave birth to 17.
So
I mean, like, if you had enough, like, twins and stuff, or, like,
yeah, like if you had more
twins
than
ran in
once,
your family,
yeah.
like, triplets and stuff.
quite possibly, yeah. But yes, so that's pretty crazy when you think about it that way. All right, so is it okay to take unfertilized egg cells? I don't know. That's up to you. You guys are the new generation. This is going to present itself into our society one day. So you'll be the ones that have to decide whether this is morally acceptable or not. And that's perfectly fine. Okay? So, but just giving you some ideas and thoughts to think about for the future. So, stem cells, pretty important. Okay? We'll stop here. We won't do the review, but you can check it out from there. Okay? So that's all I wanted to go over for the 9.3 stem cells.